Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final episode of the year of Common Censored. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other shit.
And the other shit speaker right there is Eleanor Goldfield, joining me, Lee Camp, on this very special episode. Why is it a very special episode? I'm glad you asked, because it's every episode is very special.
But why is
they've all been very
this
special.
night different than all other nights?
Tonight is different because it's final episode of the year.
Of the decade.
Final episode of the decade.
We're heading into the roaring 20s, folks.
We're headed, roaring in a whole different way than the last 20s. This one is because the United States Empire, the American Empire, is a caged lion, and so we're headed into the roaring 20s.
You just really have to rain on everybody's parade.
Cornered lion. And now it's time for us to lose our shit.
Can we still wear flapper dresses?
Absolutely. You said fapper dresses, right? We're going to get into a lot of great stuff in this episode. Some of it positive, most of it negative. Can you please laugh into the mic so that people know that I'm getting laughs here? Because otherwise it sounds like I'm bombing.
No, because it's not fair. I'm not a fair judge right now because I think everything's funny because I've got such a horrific period cramps.
Hey, now. That is inappropriate.
This makes all men uncomfortable.
For television
but I'm
and
here
radio.
To tell all men, women, and non-binary folks that I've got wicked period cramps right now. So a lot of things are funny. A lot of things are really tragic too.
Listen, my period cramps are no picnic right now either. Okay? Go ahead.
No.
Well, we're all sorry to hear that, but we hope you've taken a lot of Valium and Advil and you're ready to go.
I've taken 4 horse tranquilizers and a muscle relaxer. Or maybe it was the other way around. I don't remember.
4 horse relaxers.
4 horse relaxers
and a muscle tranquilizer. All right, good. We're going to get into what's a quick roundup of what's going on in the presidential race, as we like to do while we shit on the presidential race. We're going to get into a lot about economics and where we see the economy going in the next year, if not the next 10 years. But I think the shit will hit the fan in the next year, I honestly believe. Get into some Twitter censorship, but not just Twitter. I want to go through kind of the entirety of the censorship we're seeing against alternative voices, independent voices. And we're going to get into year-end giving ideas that we have for you. And don't worry, it's not all us. We have other ideas of things you can give to and people you can help out. And let's get moving. In terms of the quick rundown of the presidential race. So here are the national, according to 538.com, which has their head up their ass about a lot of things, but I do think they're accurately portraying the polls that are inaccurately polling the American populace. So if you followed that, that's what we're dealing with. The national polls, if you average them together, according to 538, are Biden at 27%, Sanders at 17%, Warren at 15%, and Buttigieg at 8%. And everybody else is basically off the map. Now, one thing to consider is that is the national average. So that's including states that are way down on the primary schedule. Therefore, those states will, and this is guaranteed, change drastically depending on what happens in the first 3-4 contests. So, and I think that our mainstream media wants to talk about this as if this is the legitimate polling because they want to show Biden winning.
What exactly? I want to know what they're asking these people to shoot Biden up to 27%, because
if you had a poll up your ass and someone was holding a gun to your head simultaneously, who would you vote for?
What are my choices?
Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg, apparently.
Because I think regardless of what's up my ass and any guns involved, I would still pick Sanders.
There you go. Well, you are in the minority, apparently. One other thing, something else to consider with the national polling and everything is that Biden has been decreasing steadily as this time has gone on. Sanders is holding at 17% despite basically no mainstream media, if not attacks on mainstream media. And Biden is going to keep going down, not just because every time he opens his mouth, people are like, what the fuck? His teeth fall out, and then they chatter across the stage and fall off.
And say something racist.
His eye explodes, and then he gives the rest of the speech to the wrong direction. He's like Mr. Burns up there. It's really kind of hideous to watch. But besides even that, the Senate impeachment trial, whether it's quick or long, is going to continue to focus on Biden's corruption and his son's putting his son on the oil company board in the Ukraine and all of that shit. And Biden is at the front and center of it. And so his numbers are going to keep decreasing. Sanders has an immense ground game and an immense donation pool. He doesn't just have one giant corporate backer like Buttigieg or whatever, 10 corporate backers like Buttigieg does. So it seems very like, and Biden and Sanders might win California, which would be massive. And it's been moved up. California's moved up to Super Tuesday. So that he would have that huge win early in the contest as opposed to later. Anyway, there's a lot of very good signs for Sanders doing very well, and you actually see some mainstream outlets are starting to cover the fact that Bernie Sanders has a good chance of winning this if you take the kind of rigging and the cheating out of it. So will the DNC simply just decide that Bernie Sanders is not Democratic enough and therefore cancel his ability to win? That's a possibility. We've talked about a lot of the various ways it could be rigged. But anyway, those are the numbers. And something else to mention. And you know, well, they've been talking about Buttigieg like he's winning all this time and he's fucking at 8%. Like they can't
it's like
stop.
The Onion headline: Bernie plummets up 5 points.
Yeah,
like they have to talk about the reality in such a warped way so as to make somebody like Buttigieg look good because he's their kind of guy, whereas Sanders to them is like so far off the map to the left that that there be monsters. So they have to talk about it in that like paradigm.
And one other thing to note is that despite Bloomberg's 100 million, I think it's more like
remember Bloomberg in the race?
Yeah, I think it's more like 120 million ad buy that he already has, dollars he's already spent. He's still on, which is heads and tails above anybody else. He's still only at 4 or 5% nationally. So despite all of that shit, just papering people's televisions, he's barely squeaking up to like what, Amy Klobuchar has or some of these other candidates.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you're never in the spotlight in terms of showing up for debates and town halls and things like that, even if you have the ad buys, if nobody's ever had a chance to talk to you or ask a question, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Even if you show up like the way that Biden does with his falling apart and saying the dumbest shit you can ever imagine, or just saying, "Oh, my time's up," before he ever answers a fucking question. He's still showing up in a place where people are reminded that he's on stage, or parts of him are on stage.
Parts of him are on stage.
Whereas Bloomberg is just like a fucking ghost.
Okay, so moving on, following our quick roundup of the presidential race, let's get to this will ultimately get to economics, but
I just want to
let's start off with.
Yeah,
go ahead, just read it.
I want to read.
It's more interesting if I don't give a.
I want to read this headline. Okay, this was a New Scientist in the middle of December. People in Japan are wearing exoskeletons to keep working as they age.
Can you break down that sentence for us? Because I have a lot of questions.
Oh, there's a lot of breaking down happening. So. Basically, and if you go to New Scientist and you see this article, there's a picture of two older men. I mean, I'm not good at judging age, but there's gray and white hair happening. So
hey,
no spring
there's some
chickens.
gray hair happening on me. So Let's not judge.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that they are decidedly older than you. And they look pretty frail, and they have these things strapped to their backs, which, to be honest, look like fucking jetpacks, which I feel like would be more useful because then they could get the fuck out of here. But they're...
Where would they go, precisely?
I don't know. Somewhere. But I'd say somewhere where they're not exploited, but that's not on planet Earth. So basically, they're these exoskeleton packs that they have on their back, and there's a picture of them lifting these crates, and literally that's the answer to aging workers in Japan. Not like, hey, let's find a way to take care of people and make it so that they don't have to work until they literally collapse. It's like, no, we have technology that we could strap to their backs and make them kind of like a human,
half human, half robot. Cyborg
droid, like a droid human that just works longer. That sounds like a much better idea.
So these people have already been working for, God knows how many years, lifting things, and now these companies have each one of these things. You should Google them and look at what they look like. These exoskeletons, but they look like Iron Man or Tony Stark or some shit, and they cost like $10,000. I think I read somewhere, or $10,000 to $20,000, and then the company will buy them so that these breaking down human beings can keep working for them.
Yeah, and so part of this started because Japan's population is aging rapidly, about 20%.
Well, I think they're aging at the same rate of time as most of the world.
It goes faster.
Really faster there.
All those mountains, time passes quicker.
Time passes faster up top, yeah.
28% of people are 65 or older, and this has led to a shortage of workers, particularly in manual labor industries such as construction, manufacturing, and farming. So the way that they're responding to this is to make sure that people can work longer.
See, the just ethical way to deal with this would be let them retire and put the 5-year-olds to work. Let's. I
mean, I agree. Their backs.
Let's
are
be
fine.
fair.
Their backs are fine.
Their backs are doing great.
And one employer told New Scientist in the article, we quote, "We have no option. Elderly people need to stay at the workplace." So, and I know that we've talked about automation on this show before, and the idea that that a lot of people on the left have a bit of a warped perspective about automation because they feel quite rightly that the gains aren't going to go to the people. But that doesn't mean that the concept of automation is a bad one. It's actually a very good one. And recently, I just saw, I think it was like a couple of days ago, there was an article that came out that Walmart has started putting in instead of janitors to clean up the stores, they have basically like a turbocharged Roomba that cleans the floors and stuff like that. So they're on track to fire a lot of people that would be cleaning those floors.
Well, and they literally fired just a few months ago all of their the greeters who were disabled or differently abled and people that couldn't find jobs elsewhere had jobs as these greeters, and they've all been purged.
And that's the interesting thing.
Out back, they dump them in.
Well, you got to keep the fire going somehow. And that's the thing with this story is that a lot of these jobs that they're talking about are in manual labor, construction and manufacturing. I mean, one of these their examples talks about being able to lift, these heavy crates that are up to 25 kilos. Okay. I know a lot of robots that can lift a crate. Like, this is not like we already have robots. We have mechanized non-human entities that can do these kind of menial jobs without you having to strap a fucking exoskeleton to an old Japanese person who should fucking retire and appreciate the last like 10 years of their life.
Well, and of course, you and I are saying that because we would want it that these things are mechanized and then the worker gets a great pension or whatever. Right. The worker, let's say, continues to get the salary that the robot is of the work the robot's now doing. But of course, that's not how it works. And we've seen that in the auto industry here in the U.S. So many workers were replaced by machines on the factory floor, and those workers are just out of job. They're just kicked out on their asses no matter how many years they've worked for the company. And that's how capitalism works. But that's the reverse of a moral universe. That's the reverse of how this system should work. These things should be automated, and then the workers should have to work less, and they should get great benefits and great pensions. But of course, capitalism is just greed at all costs.
And Shinzo Abe, the prime minister of Japan, sugarcoated this in the way that politicians often do when he talked about lifting the retirement age that's 60 from 60 to 70. He said, quote, "I want healthy, willing, elderly people to use their experience and wisdom in society." As if to say that the only way an older person can give some of their wisdom to society is by lifting crates with an exoskeleton strapped to their fucking backs.
So the exoskeleton actually helps their wisdom? Does it strengthen? It firms up the wisdom?
Yes. It's a soul strengthener.
Soul strengthener. And of course, these devices and this incredible technology is developed by corporations, by the military often, to make better workers or better soldiers, people that can kill. It's almost never, at least initially, used to just help people's lives. Like people, I don't know if you've said it on the air, but we were chatting about this before we started, and you mentioned that like this isn't grandfathers can't have this, at least right now, unless they're very wealthy, have this to just help pick up their kids. Like this isn't given to people to just enjoy their lives better.
It's like that'd be such a cool idea if it was like, hey, grandpa, you have degenerative spine disorder and you can barely stand up. Here, try this exoskeleton that would help you do that. No, that's not what it's there for. It's, as you pointed out, it's there so that the company can make some extra bucks on these aging workers.
I mean, and to go back to the how much work everyone's doing, and I know on past shows, I think maybe even last week, I talked about how what are most people working towards? Most people are not doing their passion. Most people are working to just feed this capitalist, consumerist beast in order to pay their bills. And I don't fault them for that. But this is a death economy. It's eating itself. It's destroying the planet. We should all be working a lot less. And if we were all working less at jobs we hate and putting our skills, our effort towards dealing with other issues, dealing with climate change, dealing with environmental destruction, dealing with just helping others. I mean, if people who are working at Starbucks in order to pay their bills could instead be volunteering as a free daycare or something like that to take care of children, or volunteering as a free EMT for people that can't afford the insane health costs in our country. Like, there's so much good could be going on in our world if our work, our effort, our tireless, I mean, you're giving part of yourself when you work at these jobs. And if we weren't giving so much of ourselves to jobs we hate, that effort, that life force would go to other things. It would go to so many other important things in society that are falling by the wayside.
It also, it speaks so much to the programming, and of course, it's different in Japan. I remember seeing a documentary about what happened at Fukushima and how the workers...
Did something happen there? I missed that one.
How the workers who were first sent in to basically like try to duct tape the fucking reactors and contain, like, and they basically died within like a month because they're just walking into a giant concentrated...
They were told beforehand. It was like basically you're volunteering to die.
Well, yeah, but they took a lot of pride in that. And in his documentary, it talks about like how they really thought of it as, oh, I'm giving my life for my country and my... There wasn't this perspective that like, I can't believe this fucking company was this fucking like unaccountable, incompetent, and now I have to die. Just like, you should send the fucking CEO in. Like there was none of that.
That'd be amazing. That's like a go down with the ship moment.
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I think you should just have thrown him into a vat of radioactive water, if you want my opinion. But point being, being, it's like there's a different, and you see this as well in the U.S., but it's on a different scale in Japanese culture. This idea that like I take so much pride in my work and my ability to give. It's a much more selfless culture. So that obviously works for people in a lot of ways. Obviously, they're not as isolated and dickish as many Americans, but it also, the flip side of it is this sort of like, no, I take pride in the fact that I can work until I literally drop dead. And in the US, you have a little bit of that, but it's mostly tied to this sort of like toxic masculinity thing. Like when I was in West Virginia, this whole like, oh, the coal fields, and you're a man if you can get into the coal fields, and you can work until you cough up a lung, and like there's something powerful and manly about it.
They have a lung bucket at the entrance of the mine. You can just spit it out there.
But like, regardless of whether it's an individualistic or a more communal culture, there is this sort of romanticization of working your ass off, and it's a brilliant scheme. It's a brilliant con, because basically, as you notedly, what you're doing is you're giving your life for some dick stick to buy a second yacht. But the way that it's fed to us is like, oh, you're being a responsible part of society. You're giving your wisdom to society by strapping this shit to your back and continuing to work till you literally can't sit up anymore. And so it becomes this culture that we have to extract ourselves from if we're going to look at it from this perspective that like, this is fucking sick. Yeah. And if you actually need workers, then you need to talk, then we need to have serious discussions about how we can mechanize certain things, and how we can take care of people that are aging, and how we can train people who are younger into the jobs, the industries that are needed. Like, have those conversations, as opposed to like, hey, we came up with this exoskeleton thing and now pick up that crate, old man.
I think that this exoskeleton, the back brace, it's kind of a good analogy for our economy as a whole. Like, it's propped up right now, but with twine and bubble gum, chewed bubble gum, sticking it together, and we'll just strap this thing on here, and we'll strap that brace on there, and we'll just keep moving one leg after another. If he can't move his own legs, have children just move his legs for him, and you can just keep marching along off the cliff into the abyss. I mean, I mean, I include Japan in this. It's basically like capitalist cultures in general are reaching a breaking point, environmentally, ecologically, both. Also in terms of just what workers can sustain, what we're able to continue to manifest. It's just all collapsing down around us. And then there's the more direct, the longer term stuff, which longer term may just be 20 years or something, is the environmental and stuff. But the shorter term, meaning this coming year, is the economic collapse that at the least America will have. And at the least it will be a recession, if not a full on, depression or collapse or something. But we have been inflating this bubble, giving all of the spoils of it to a tiny 1% at the top. And it honestly should have happened this past year, but now we're getting into 2020. They've kept this bubble propped up longer than, to mix all my metaphors together, longer than ever before, or at least in a long time. The average used to be 4 to 7 years before a recession. Now we're going like 12 years or something, and it honestly, this coming year is something serious is going to happen. If it happens before the election, chances are Trump will lose. If it happens after the election, chances are Trump will win, because economics is so powerful in the voting electorate and how they behave. But outside of just the Trump thing, it's time for all of us to realize that we're at a breaking point of capitalism, and we need to start transitioning, evolving beyond it. We need to start talking with each other about what comes after it, about where this system should head if we want a sustainable future. I mean, this is it. This is the end of the fork in the road. We got to the fork in the road about a decade and a half ago, but now we're at the end of the fork.
The end of the fork, folks.
And by the way, if you have money in stocks, don't do that because
What are you thinking? Under the bed?
Put it mattress? But invest in under the bed. I don't know. I don't have the answer of where you should put your money, but I know that this coming year, I don't think stocks are going to be doing very well. But luckily, 10% of the, well, I was going to say luckily, but 10% of the population owns 80% of all stocks, but that doesn't mean that people's pensions don't fucking take a massive hit when these things go down.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, the rich are going to be fine. The ultra rich are going to be fine.
I was just about to tell them for year-end giving they should donate to the rich. Is that not good? Are we not doing that?
We're not going to eat the rich folks. We're going to prop them up more. They need more cushioning.
If you could just, you know what, just send an envelope with some cash in it to like Goldman Sachs or Bank of America, just put on the outside for whatever's needed.
For emergency.
For emergency. Just send all your cash their way, and you know you feel good about that. That was a good segue to year-end giving ideas.
There's a method to your madness.
There's a method. There's always a method to my madness. The first one we have on the list, and this is not an extensive list, which just a short, quick one if you're looking into year-end giving right now, because this is the last few days. We mentioned it last week. We have an incredible friend, incredible activist, awesome guy named Phil. I mispronounced it last week. Tato. Spelled a Tito, but it's pronounced a Tato.
It's not spelled a Tito.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's A-T-E-T-O. If it was a Tito, it'd be A-T-E-E or A-T-I.
Okay, got it. Phil
just saying.
We're just gonna call him Phil. Phil is
that is also his name.
No, but he honestly is one of the most genuine, awesome, incredible human beings I know, and we've both gotten to work with him on different projects, and we love the guy, and he is fighting cancer right now, and our system is so unbelievably fucked that he has a GoFundMe for the cancer meds he needs.
Which is actually the most common use for GoFundMe is medical costs.
It's something like 25% of all GoFundMe accounts are medical costs. How fucked is that? Actually, we're going to get more into that in a minute. But anyway, you can go to tinyurl, tinyurl.com/keepphilalive.
Every time you say Tiny Earl, I picture a little dude.
We did that last week. We did that joke last week, though.
No, okay, fine. It's a callback or whatever you people call it. But isn't it Tiny URL? Or you're just too lazy to spell it out?
People can say Earl. People say Earl all the time.
No, Earl is like a seat in Parliament or the House of Lords or whatever.
I like saying Earl because it's more enjoyable to me than URL.
I thought you were going to stop it. It's more enjoyable than you.
The Earl? Anyway, tinyurl.com/keepphilalive. I know that title sounds funny, but that's what they named the GoFundMe.
Well, it's straight into the point.
And he's already over halfway to the goal. So it's hopeful he'll get the funds he needs. And like I said, we're going to get more into the topic of our ridiculous healthcare here in a minute. You want to go through some of the others for year-end giving?
And so also, I totally understand if people are listening to this and like, I don't have any fucking money to give. Well, these are also, even if you don't have money to give, there are other ways that you can support these organizations, even just by signing up to their newsletter and spreading the word about them. So even if you don't have money to give, please don't skip over this, because these are good organizations to just know of and connect with. One of them is popularresistance.org. They are a badass national and in many ways international activist organization that not only puts up original content, but that puts up content from other places. You know, they put up my show. They share things that Lee has written. They also have an activist calendar.
Also on that same page, they are facing heavy legal fees for the Venezuela embassy protection lawsuit trial. So, and they could end up going to jail. So that's why they are spending money on legal fees, and they're trying to raise funds for that. Another way our system's fucked up. Wow.
Yeah. Well, welcome to this show. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
So that's another great one, popularresistance.org. No More Deaths, No Mas Muertes. You might have heard of this in the past year because one of the members was on trial for giving humanitarian aid to folks trying to get through the borderlands and was eventually acquitted on those charges, but they still have a lot of, not to mention the legal fees, but they also still do a lot of work with regards to humanitarian aid and human rights by the border, so they could definitely use the help and the connections. That's No More Deaths. Another one is Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. I know that I've mentioned them on this show and I've had them on my show before. They're a great organization and they basically go to affected areas by natural disasters, or rather these days it's unnatural thanks to climate change. But they were very instrumental in places like Puerto Rico.
Oh, when you said affected areas, I thought you meant the rash on my groin.
I don't think they can help you there.
That's infected areas. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. I misunderstood.
I recommend some sort of salve.
Salve.
I hear chamomile.
Will that solve it?
Was that supposed to be a joke?
No.
Okay. Moving on. Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, they do great work, and their motto is solidarity, not charity. So unlike a lot of these kind of NGOs, they don't go into a place and say, hey, and just throw a bunch of fucking alcohol wipes at people. They actually go in and say, hey, what do you need? How can we help?
I still like the idea of Tom's shoes raining down on people who are really hungry.
Right.
They're just like, we got all these shoes. What do we do with the shoes?
For folks who haven't heard
you stew them. You put them in a boiling water, and you.
For folks who haven't heard Lee's joke about that, there is this shoe company, Tom's, that
they know what it is. Everyone.
I didn't know what it was until I heard your joke.
Everyone knows what it is.
They don't. Okay, fine. I'm not allowed to tell you because apparently you already know.
They donate a pair for every pair that you buy.
Okay, moving on. Another one is Seeding Sovereignty. And that's an indigenous and women-led resistance group that deals with obviously indigenous rights and also the climate change, land rights, and the like. And obviously,
one more.
Of course, food sovereignty.
I'll let you have one more.
And there's this little podcast called Common Censored, and we'd love for you to become a patron.
Oh my God, you said it so adorably that I think it's really gonna do the trick.
Yeah, I think so. That voice is.
If you have like $4 left over, go to patreon.com/commoncensored, become a member over there, and that concludes your year-end giving. Because you'll notice that on this podcast we don't have any sponsors, we don't have any ads. You don't hear ads for anything except for, right now we're giving you year-end giving ideas, but none of those places pay us to do it. It's just things we think you should know. So it's all kept afloat by you. And a couple other quick things outside of the year-end giving that I'll mention. Live shows coming up and this goes through like June. So these are not all these shows are like tomorrow, but Philadelphia's in January, Dallas, Austin, February, Flagstaff, Arizona. Look, Phoenix tickets should be up soon. I hope Montreal, Columbus, Ohio, Toronto, Burlington, Vermont is coming soon. Pittsburgh, Ottawa, Asheville, North Carolina. Many of those are either already available or coming soon. RedactedTour.com is where you can get all that. Eleanor will be opening the show for some of those. RedactedTour.com. You can also vote for your city to be added. This is my book tour / stand-up tour, so it'll be a lot like a stand-up comedy show, but then there'll be some book stuff and then a Q&A. It'll be really fun events, so please check those out. The book, by the way, if you want to pre-order, is at leecampbook.com. There's a UK site as well. That's my new book, leecampbook.com. All of Eleanor's, yay. All of Eleanor's stuff is at artkillingapathy.com. The videos, the spoken word, the music, it's all there. So please check that out. And we are always taking your ideas and your comments on things we've said, things we've gotten wrong. But, if you want us to really consider it, it needs to be things we've gotten right. commoncensored@protonmail.com is where you can email us. And to sign up to our email list, text the word censored to 33777, I believe. 33777. Text the word censored. That'll get you signed up for free. Shall we move on?
I thought it was...
Nope.
Okay.
It's changed.
Well, would you like to move on?
Yes.
Okay.
So next topic is... pretty frequently we bring you the way that censorship has continued to get bad of alternative media voices, independent media, anything outside of your corporatized horseshit is continually suppressed. My show, Eleanor's show, Gray Zone, Popular Resistance. And I think I just need to keep bringing it to you, the new and better ways that they've found to censor things. This one I found kind of interesting. Gray Zone tweeted about their interview. They have an interview with the possible successor to Evo Morales. Evo Morales was just what's it called? Dethroned, but it's not a throne.
He was ousted forcefully by a coup,
by U.S.-backed
created
coup
by the U.S.
All right, just because I got one word wrong doesn't mean you have to take it all from me. You were like, he's done, he's out. I got a giant hook around my neck, and she was like, I'm on it. Yes, a U.S.-backed coup in Bolivia kicked out Evo Morales, a violent fascist right-wing coup. So there's a new leftist candidate running for president in the upcoming elections, and Gray Zone did an interview with him. They tweeted that out, and then, as Max Blumenthal was showing, Twitter made it so that if you tried to click on the link, you'd get a warning that basically said, this has a note attached to it or whatever. And the thing then described what a Twitter note is. So it didn't actually give any info as to why this content needed to be blocked, but it didn't allow you to get to the content.
Right.
So you click on the link and it just says, hey, here's Twitter notes. Here's what you get when you get a Twitter note.
Which immediately makes it look like you clicked on the wrong thing, because it's like, oh, I must have accidentally hit like some Twitter settings or information button. I'll go back. And so you go back and then you get stuck in this horrific loop of, wait, I don't understand. I'm not getting a specific notice about this content, but I'm also not getting this content. What the fuck's going on? And then you start thinking that you're losing your goddamn mind.
And the thing is, most people, even people that care, are pretty lazy, and so they click on it, they get that note, they can't get through the link, they don't go and Google the interview, they generally give up. So most people are not seeing the interview, and this seems specifically designed to stop people from learning about left-wing candidates in Bolivia that could win the next election and oust the coup leaders, oust the people who ousted Evo Morales. They don't want that to happen. Who knows? Maybe it's the Atlantic Council. Who knows who it is at Twitter that makes these decisions? But it's fucking repulsive. And this is on the back of, and I can't remember whether I've mentioned this on the episode on the podcast before, but just a couple of weeks ago, there was a 60 Minutes interview with the CEO of YouTube. And she proudly said, now most of this thing, 10 minutes of 60 Minutes, talks about how, there's used to be more neo-Nazi stuff on YouTube and all this white supremacist stuff and pedophiles and violence. And the CEO of YouTube says, we've decreased viewing of controversial content by 70%. And when she says that, they then show things like CNN and MSNBC, as she says, and we've increased content of acceptable viewing. So, yes, does that mean they've decreased neo-Nazi viewing? Sure. Does it also mean they've decreased viewing of Redacted Tonight or Art Killing Apathy, Act Out, or, any of these other shows, Gray Zone interviews, all of that stuff, Empire Files with Abby Martin, all that shit that we put out, all that quality content that we put out has been heavily reduced. And this goes for anything that is outside of CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, those kind of mainstream platforms. And so she is bragging that they've succeeded at stopping people from viewing anything that questions the American empire, anything that goes against the corporate talking points, anything that is pro-peace instead of pro-war. YouTube is bragging about having suppressed that content. And to me, that is like a level of disgusting. And, in this new year, I mean, just to kind of summarize it, in this new year, I think we have to start building up alternative platforms. We have to grow the channels of information and activism that will create the change we need, because if we fucking sit here and just watch as they put anything that's outside of corporate horseshit into a tiny little box that only a couple of people can see, then we're losing.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to also notice these tactics, because when it's wrapped in this sort of propaganda that, hey, isn't this amazing that we've been able to cut down this questionable content? So it's sold to you in this really great way. I mean, they're not going to go up there and say that we've squashed content that doesn't agree with the State Department. Like, they're never going to couch things that way. Like, we have to recognize how propaganda works and how this sort of Orwellian machine, how well it's oiled. Because, this is kind of a callback to what happened earlier this year, when this whole thing with Alex Jones was going down. And so many people on the left were like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm so glad they're finally getting that guy to shut the fuck up. And it's like, yeah, I don't like Alex Jones. He's a dim-witted piece of shit. But that's not the point here.
Right.
The point is that that's a long list of people. Alex Jones is just at the top, but I'm on that list.
Right.
You, Lee, are on that list. People that we respect and care about are on that list. And so the idea that they would just go after the person that you don't like is ridiculous, and it's absurd. And I'm not saying that we should link hands with Alex Jones here, but we have to know these tactics and what they look like and what they come wrapped in, and not fall for this bullshit. And really, like you said, Lee, like create this organized front, not just against this sort of censorship, but in building alternatives.
Yeah, and you just have to think, at the end of the day, who is it that's making the decision of what's allowed to be seen? The beauty of YouTube and the internet in general, and you see this in the designers of the internet, the early folks that helped create a free and open internet, they envisioned it as a kind of new world where there would be this freedom. You wouldn't have only 3 TV channels that were controlled by the State Department interests. And for a moment, it kind of succeeded in that. For 15 years, in various areas were freer, and various areas were less free, but it kind of succeeded in making this open platform. YouTube was incredibly free and open, and I wouldn't have achieved any success with my YouTube shows or anything if it weren't. If it were the way it is now, I don't think I would have gotten nearly the following. But back then, they were allowing people to decide for themselves what they wanted to see and what they found interesting and what they found to be truthful. And now all of that is being shut down, and we as activists, as those fighting back, need to be just acutely aware of it, need to speak out against it, need to be the change in that you share this stuff with others and you don't care whether they have fed into the bullshit lines. Like, if you share Common Censored with friends, our podcast, or one of our videos or something, and they say, that doesn't agree with what I heard on Rachel Maddow, I'm not following you on Facebook anymore. Fucking be like, good, go fuck yourself. And unless you actually want to sit down and discuss this and I can explain to you why you're wrong, then fuck you.
Yeah, be okay with losing quote-unquote friends. I mean, especially because what the fuck is a Facebook friend anyway, let's be honest.
Well, Facebook has redefined friends. It used to mean someone you cared about and knew well, and now it's someone whose thumbnail mildly made your dick stand up. So, moving on.
For those of us not graced with dicks, what is it?
Not graced with dicks. No, I was just kidding about.
So that's why you have so many friends, you horny little bastard.
I have 5,000 friends. I have the peak friends. I have reached peak friends.
Anywho, so yeah, very very important note there. And also, on that, like, if people, we know some alternative sites that are available for social media, but there's yet to be ones that actually it can even go up even slightly against something like Facebook. So anybody who's like a tech whiz listening to this or knows a tech whiz, like, let's get on that, folks. I don't even know what the fuck HTML means, so I'm not going to be driving that bus. But anybody who knows this shit and has thought the same things that we have thought.
It means hat tip man love. It's
just the tip, just for a second, just to see how it feels.
Yep.
Anyway, this is a kid-friendly show.
Is it though?
Well, I guess it depends on what you feel comfortable telling your kids.
Or it depends on how fucked up your kid is.
Or how fucked up you want them to be. Okay, so folks might remember way back in the day, like a full 4 years ago, if we can remember that far back, there was a fight.
Were there humans on Earth then? Because I thought that was dinosaurs.
Just sort of a tangent here. I think it's funny because we're in Sweden right now, and I was talking to a friend last night about like he had gone to visit a friend of his in the US who was like super excited to show him this building that was like from 1870, and my friend was like, "Oh, okay,
1970s, real old."
I live in a city that was founded in the 1200s. So,
or around here, or anywhere in England or whatever, people's apartment buildings are from like 1810.
Yeah, my mom's old apartment in Stockholm was like from the 1700s, and it's like, it's whatever. Okay.
I noticed the water system's also from 1810.
You know what?
No. Don't start.
Sweden is not great in a lot of ways. Sweden is unfortunately shifting to the right. But I will say one thing. You can fucking go to your kitchen sink and turn on the water and drink the water that you fill up your glass with.
You can do that in the U.S. as well if you're looking to kill some sort of cancer.
Or get kind of cancer.
No. You use it to kill some kind of cancer. It's kind of like it's like chemotherapy. You can get it straight out of the tap.
You know what? I would believe you, except Big Pharma would never let you get chemotherapy for free right out of your tap. Okay, so this next story, coming back from that tangent. You may recall from right around 2015, there was a fight around Oak Flat, which is in Apache territory in Arizona. And what happened, December 2014, so even further back, my bad. John McCain, remember him?
Yes.
Okay, so back in, first a little bit of a backstory here. Oak Flat is sacred to the Apache people. And there's a huge mining corporation that wants to create a copper mine in Oak Flat. And Oak Flat has been protected since the 50s. And then the early 2000s, Resolution Copper, which is the company.
And if I recall, the mining company is owned by China. It could be. We don't need to verify that right now, but I think I remember that. But anyway.
Either way, just like any other huge corporation, they're multinational. They don't give a rat's ass about borders. And they certainly, just like anybody else, don't give a rat's ass about the sacred land, whether that be to the Apache or any other people. But basically, Oak Flat has been off limits to mining since the 1950s, and then in the early 2000s, the copper company started to lobby harder to get bills to remove these protections. And then John McCain comes moseying along, and basically snuck in a resolution to strip the protection of Oak Flat into a military bill. Yeah. Kind of like the federal, parental leave was snuck into the last one. There was just some arbitrary shit about a formerly protected Apache sacred land slipped into a military funding bill.
Yeah, that's very common in Congress. Is they put this pork barrel shit, which this is pork barrel shit because this was Arizona senators, and also included Jeff Flake, no longer a senator, but he was. And at the time, he was also a big proponent of this. And this was them giving back to their state by allowing this land to be stripped and bringing in mining companies. And these pieces of shit. McCain and Flake and others that didn't give a shit about the people that live there. And I remember when I covered this on Redacted way back, Jeff Flake went out on the Senate floor and listed about 7 people, because he said this was good for jobs and this was really helping out the area of around Oak Flat. And oh my goodness, what a wonderful thing this was for the people. And he listed about 7 people that had jobs on or near Oak Flat mining, and how some of them were natives and everything. And I was like, guess what? In capitalism, unfettered capitalism, where people are fucking oppressed and their families are hungry and they need jobs, you can pay them to dig their own grave. Yep. And the fact that these people, some even indigenous people, have jobs helping to gut this area does not make it okay.
No, and you see the same thing in Louisiana. I mean, there's so many, like for instance, the Atacama Eshak tribe in southern Louisiana. They don't have an official statement, for instance, on the oil industry, because so many of their members have to work for the oil industry, and it's so fucking twisted. Talk about Stockholm syndrome. Although I don't like that word because Stockholm's a lovely city, but
they're keeping me here. I need to get out, please. If anyone can hear this at home, let me.
I'd be totally fine if they wanted to keep me here, but that's neither here nor there. So why are we talking about this if this happened back in 2014? Well, recently, these things do take time to go through all the processes, and part of that is on purpose. They want people to forget that this is a story, right? Because there were a lot of groups back when this first came up that were really vocal about it. I think even Leonardo DiCaprio said something about it, and then they're expecting that shit to die down when things like the environmental impact statement comes through, which is what happened in late November of this year. There was a hearing where federal officials were going to present and summarize the findings of the environmental impact statement that's required for these mining projects. The problem is that that's bullshit, because McCain's legislation actually wrote in a directive to the government to hand over Oak Flat regardless of environmental impact. Like, right. That's how fucked up this was. That no matter how, because obviously McCain already knew that it was sacred land. Well, I mean, all land is actually sacred, but that's a larger point. But
hippie.
But like, he already knew how important it was to the Apache people. But he not only that, but he was like, I don't even care how horrific this is, how incredibly destructive this will be. Fucking go for it. Whatever the environmental impact statement says. And I mean, right. the extent of this mine is hard to really think of. It's at its deepest point, it will be taller than 3 statues of liberties stacked on top of each other. That's how insanely fucking destructive this mine is going to be. And for folks who know it, even if you don't know a lot about mining, you can imagine mining isn't just about that land right there. It's obviously affecting the groundwater. It's affecting the air. It's affecting, obviously, the ecosystems around it.
I believe I've asked you this before, and I don't feel like I got a good answer from you. When they dig something like this, when they, mountaintop removal, all the ground they're removing, it grows back, right?
Yes, there are these little Oompa Loompas that come out, actually. And,
got it.
When everyone's sleeping at night, the Oompa Loompas put the
mountain back.
Now,
is that child labor, or that's okay?
No, I think they're just small.
Okay, small labor. Got it.
Small labor.
All right. Well, as long as it grows back, I'm not
actually.
Too worried.
Right? The Oompa Loompas were orange?
Donald Trump has not labored a day in his life, so.
I know, so it's a new concept. It's very exciting. So anyway, this is now this fight is reigniting because the Apache have made it clear that regardless of what the environmental impact statement says is okay, it's not okay, and so they've reignited this call. They've re-amplified it. A lot of organizations are pledging to stand with them, and so it's also important that we recognize that this story is back, and they're trying to move forward with this mine again because the part of the bill said that it doesn't matter what the environmental impact statement says, they should hand over the land at Oak Flat to this mining company. So really important that people stay up to date on what's happening here, so we can lend our support either physically or however folks can lend their support to this fight.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get to this next story because it does, it's a nice offshoot of the story about our friend Phil. The New York Times is covering this. And by the way, I have personally renamed the New York Times. I've renamed it Just Noticed. Because generally, anytime you find an article that's actually good and well done, and you're like, yes, exactly, in the New York Times, they're 10 or 20 years too late. Mm-hmm. So this one, the title is, in the U.S., an angioplasty costs $32,000. And angioplasty is heart surgery, right? Elsewhere, $6,400. So maybe $6,400. That's the high end of elsewhere, really. In some places, just completely free. And a study of international prices has found American patients pay much more across a wide array of common services. And Just Noticed covered this week. Noticed. So very exciting that they got to this. But this goes to, and I think I mentioned this either last week or the week before, what we've said many times about how fucking ridiculous and rigged our healthcare system is. And obviously, Medicare for All has become a common talking point, which would not have happened without activists standing up and fighting endlessly. Eleanor's done a lot with that, and Popular Resistance has done a lot with that. And that would not be on that debate stage. Bernie Sanders would not make that a fucking tent pole of his, not that he wouldn't be doing, talking about good things, but he wouldn't be a tent pole of his campaign if it weren't for activists. And Americans are just so royally fucked in terms of healthcare. It's amazing. And what I was going to say, I mentioned on a previous podcast, was this viral video that's gone around of British people reacting as the interviewer asks them to guess what something would cost. So he says, like, guess what an ambulance ride costs in the U.S. And they know that the U.S. healthcare sucks, so they're trying to guess a high amount of money. They're not saying zero. They know that something goes on in the U.S. So he shows a couple of them that go $100, $200, and then he says, $1,300 or $3,000. $1,300 is the low end of like.
Yeah, I was just gonna say $1,300 if you live like right next door to the fucking hospital.
Well, yeah. $1,300 is like the low end of an ambulance ride. But then a lot of these things are even with insurance. Our friend Phil is struggling, and that's the amount of money he needs for cancer medications.
He has insurance.
And he has insurance, and he needs $40,000 to hopefully get these cancer meds. And we know another friend who just recently suffered a broken elbow, and they repaired it, and it cost $50,000 for one surgery to fix this elbow. And even with good insurance, he owes $10,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's with the fucking insurance. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think that the people that get fucked in our system are the ones who don't have insurance. Mm-hmm. And there's this sad, pathetic American feeling that, well, that's their fault. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't get insurance. Yeah. Too bad for them. But this is people with insurance. Is people go bankrupt all the time from medical costs when they have insurance.
Yeah, and good insurance too. Like the friend with the broken elbow has really fucking good insurance. Like this is not an HMO shit. This is like good insurance. And still, and I remember when my brother and his wife had their first child, she was premature, and basically it cost $80,000. She wasn't premature, it was the baby, right? Okay, I don't want to get into like premature things with regards to my brother and his wife. That's weird. Ew.
That's not what I meant.
That's totally what you meant.
That is not what I. That is not what I meant. That is not. You misunderstood.
Gross.
That's it. Oh man, I wish I had some sound effects like we just got in a fight, like windows break, cat meows.
No cats were harmed in the making of this podcast. No, but my niece was premature, and so basically, like, all the care needed to make sure that she was okay was $80,000, of which they had to pay a large portion, and they had really good insurance. So it's like, yeah, again, I mean, and there are countless stories like this. No one in this country, no one in the U.S., like everybody has a story like this. This has touched everybody. Everybody knows somebody with one of these fucked up stories, either about yourself or a friend or whatever. It's like, this is absolutely fucking insane. And this can't continue. It's just like the student debt can't continue. It's just like this, the wage stagnation can't continue. Something's going to give. And not that I'm I don't romanticize violence, but there will come a time, just like there's come a time in the history of every other nation, that there will be a violent blowback of a revolution. And I'd like to see ways for us to avoid getting to that point. And one of those ways is to, the release valve of, for instance, universal health care. Is that going to fix capitalism? No, fuck no. But it's going to save a shit ton of lives. And I think that's an important fight to fight for in the here and now, for your friends and family that have these kind of stories to share, for our friends and family that have these stories. No one should have to be bankrupt or slowly die because some fucking pharma and insurance company CEO wants to pad their pockets a little bit more. That's fucked up. And so these sort of stopgap measures like universal health care and free education and things like that are really vitally important, because they mean life and death and the difference between thriving and surviving for millions of people.
And that's why we're here with you. That's why we join you every week to talk about how fucked up this stuff is, and to let you know you aren't alone, because I know a lot of you are suffering from these healthcare costs. And the fight it's achieved some gains, and it will continue to, but people have to keep getting fucking furious and maintain their ability to be shocked. So when you read that New York Times article, the Just Noticed article about how much an angioplasty costs, you don't just go, yeah, tell me something else, right, and change the channel. Like, you need to continue to get angry and stand up and realize that there's a lot of people fighting on these issues.
Yeah, and we can't. I think to that point, it's the idea that we can't just read this and be like, "Yep, that's the world."
Right.
Like, we shouldn't become numb to these stories. We should use them as fuel for the fight. So yeah.
Right. And a real quick final note, that is tinyurl.com/keepphilalive. And we are headed over to patreon.com/commoncensored to do an extra 10 to 15 minutes. For those who are members, please come join us. Even if you feel like you just got $1 worth out of this episode, you help keep this podcast going. And the shows I have coming up are, in the next few months, Philly, Dallas, Austin, Flagstaff, Montreal, Columbus, Toronto, and tickets coming soon for Pittsburgh, Phoenix, Burlington, Ottawa, Asheville, New York City. So anyway, I know that that's a lot of cities. You might not have caught them all. Just keep checking back, redactedtour.com, because I'd love to see you all. I'd love to hang out with you. And that's what we got.
All right. Well, shit, I'd say until next time, but until next decade, folks. Thank you so much, and act out.
See you in 2020. Keep fighting.